hearing will come to order. The Oversight Committee exists to secure two fundamental principles. First, Americans have a right to know that the money Washington takes from them is well spent. And second, Americans deserve an efficient, effective government that works for them. Our duty on the Oversight and Government Reform Committee is to protect these rights. Our solemn responsibility is to hold government accountable to taxpayers, because taxpayers have a right to know what they get from their government. Our obligation is to work tirelessly with citizen watchdogs and whistleblowers to deliver the facts to the American people and bring genuine reform to the federal bureaucracy. On September 11, 2012, 4 Americans were murdered by terrorists. It was the 11th anniversary of the 9/11 terrorist attacks on New York and Washington. Recognizing that the witnesses before us are actual experts on what really happened before, during, and after the Benghazi attacks, I'm not going to recount those events or decisions. These witnesses deserve to be heard on the Benghazi attacks, the flaws in the Accountability Review Board's methodology, process, and conclusion. Before I introduce these witnesses and explain some of our efforts to learn more about what happened in Benghazi, can we have those doors closed, please? I want to take a moment to reflect on and to recognize the brave Americans who lost their lives in that attack that day. I also want to note that there are friends and immediate family of those killed or injured that are with us here today. J. Christopher Stevens, U.S. Ambassador to Libya. Sean Patrick Smith, Information Management Specialist. Tyrone Woods, Security Specialist and former Navy SEAL. Glenn Doherty, Security Specialist and former Navy SEAL. Our goal in this investigation is to get answers, because their families deserve answers. They were promised answers at the highest level when their bodies came home. The President was there, the Vice President was there, the Secretary of Defense was there, the Secretary of State was there. We want to make certain those promises are kept on behalf of those individuals. We also want to make certain that our government learns the proper lessons from this tragedy, so it never happens again, and so that the right people are held accountable. I want those watching this proceeding to know that we've made extensive efforts to engage the administration and to see and hear their facts. The administration, however, has not been cooperative, and unfortunately, our minority has mostly sat silent as we've made these requests. Some examples. On February 22nd, this committee wrote to Ambassador Pickering and Admiral Mullen, who, as required by law, were appointed by Secretary Clinton and co-chaired the Accountability Review Board investigation. We asked them to testify about their investigations and findings. They refused, and our minority said nothing. When we asked Ambassador Pickering and Admiral Mullen to speak with us and our committee informally, they again refused, and again there was silence by the minority. When 5 House committee chairmen wrote the White House and requested relevant documents about the Benghazi attacks, we were refused. The committee's minority did not join in a similar call for transparency, and I wish they had. On April 29th, this committee asked the State Department to make 9 current and former officials with relevant information available for this hearing or a separate transcribed interview. The State Department did not even respond. and to date, the minority has not made a similar request. Mr. Cummings, I would like nothing more than to have you work with me on this investigation. Because we've worked on other areas together, I still hold out hope that one day you will stand with me as this administration doesn't cooperate, when they ignore our inquiries. And when that day comes, together, we will be far more effective. And now for our witnesses, or should I say our whistleblowers. Mr. Mark Thompson is the Acting Deputy Assistant Secretary in the State's Department of Bureau of Counterterrorism. Welcome. Mr. Gregory Hicks is a 22-year veteran Foreign Service officer and the former Deputy Chief of Mission for the U.S. Embassy in Libya. After Ambassador Stevens was murdered, Mr. Hicks became the Acting Chief of Mission, or as they say, the Chargé d'Affaires. He was, in fact, in Libya, its highest-ranking officer, if you will, America's representative in Libya. Mr. Eric Nordstrom is the former regional security officer in Libya, and perhaps the foremost and most knowledgeable person about security requests that were made and denied to the U.S. diplomatic mission in Libya and in Benghazi, ultimately in Benghazi. Mr. Cummings, we will have from time to time our disagreements, but I know that for all the members of this committee, we understand that these disagreements must be kept on this side of the dais. These brave witnesses deserve this committee's call to testify. These brave whistleblowers are in fact what makes this committee's work work. We are the committee that oversees and that led for new whistleblower protection signed by this president. The public has a right to hear their accounts, and we, more than any other committee in the Congress, must respect whistleblowers and work on a bipartisan basis always to protect them. With that, I recognize the ranking member for his opening statement.
Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you for calling this hearing, and I want to be clear, and I've said it over and over again. There's no member of this Congress, be they Republican or Democrat, who fails to uphold the right of whistleblowers to come forward. And I think it's sad when that accusation is made against any member of this Congress. And so, to the hearing. I too, and all of our members, both Republicans and Democrats, were tremendously saddened by the deaths of J. Christopher Stevens, Sean Patrick Smith, Tyrone Woods, and Glenn Doherty. They were servants of the public. They, like our whistleblowers, were people who dedicated their lives to making a difference, and they saw the world as bigger than just them. They were the ones that were often unseen, unnoticed, unappreciated, and unapplauded. We've actually seen some of that with regard to public employees in this Congress. But yet and still, day after day, they went out there and they did their jobs. And on behalf of this Congress and a grateful nation, I say thank you. I am glad the whistleblowers are here. And I will do every single thing in my power to protect the whistleblowers. As a matter of fact, just on May 7th, 2013, I sent a letter to John Kerry, and I said in that letter that despite the highly partisan nature of the committee's actions, it nevertheless remains very important, and this is a quote, to me personally, to make clear to all government agencies and employees who choose to come forward to Congress that their interests will be protected. For these reasons, I request that the department remind its employees of their rights with respect to providing information to Congress, as well as their responsibilities not to retaliate against individuals who exercise those rights. The department may already do this as a matter of course, in which case I ask that you provide an update on the status of those efforts. Whistleblowers are important. They are very important. One of the things that I've said in this meeting room over and over again is that we must be effective and efficient. And one of the major roles of this committee is to make sure that government works properly. And so, to all of our witnesses, thank you. Mr. Hicks, I would like to start by expressing my gratitude for your service and my condolences for your loss. I can only imagine what you went through on the night of the attacks. If I had been in your place, hearing Ambassador Stevens' voice on the phone and wanting to do everything possible to help him, I would have had the same questions you had. Where's the military? Where are the special forces? Where are the fighter jets to rescue my colleagues? These are legitimate questions, and I wanted to know the answers myself. For example, last week, there was a widely publicized news report that a team in Europe called the Commanders in Extremis Force could have gotten to Benghazi before the second attack. When I heard this claim, I wrote to the Secretary of Defense immediately. Yesterday, I received an official response. It says this press report was wrong. The team was too far away, and the logistical requirements were too great. Others have suggested that F-16s, stations at Aviano Air Force Base in Italy, could have gotten there in time. But according to General Martin Dempsey, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who testified before the Senate in February, he said they could not. And this is our highest-ranking military member. The fact is that our nation's top military commanders have already testified repeatedly that they did everything in their power to mobilize and deploy assets as soon as possible, and every independent and bipartisan review has confirmed this fact. We have the best military in the world, but even with all of their technological advances, they could not get there in time. Mr. Hicks, I know these answers provide no comfort to you or the families of the victims, but this is the testimony Congress has received, and I have seen nothing to make me question the truthfulness of our nation's military commanders. Our committee has a fundamental obligation to conduct responsible oversight, and that includes carefully examining the information that you and others provide. But we also have a duty to thoroughly investigate these claims before we make public accusations. In contrast, what we have seen over the past 2 weeks is a full-scale media campaign that is not designed to investigate what happened in a responsible and bipartisan way, but rather a launch of unfounded accusations to smear public officials. Let me be clear. I am not questioning the motives of our witnesses. I am questioning the motives of those who want to use their statements for political purposes. Chairman Issa has accused the administration of intentionally withholding military assets, which could have helped save lives on the night of the attacks. I say for political reasons. Of all the irresponsible allegations leveled over the past 2 weeks, this is the most troubling. And based on what our military commanders have told us, this allegation is simply untrue. Chairman Issa suggested that 4 military personnel were told to stay in Tripoli rather than board a plane in Benghazi at 6 a.m. the morning after the attack, supposedly because of the administration's political desire not to have a presence in Benghazi. There's no evidence to support this. As Mr. Hicks told the committee, one plane had already left for Benghazi at 1:15 a.m. that night, and it included a 7-person security team with 2 military personnel. The decision the next morning to keep 4 military personnel in place in Tripoli was not made by the White House or the State Department, but by the military chain of command. There are other allegations Chairman Issa went on national TV and accused Secretary Clinton of lying to Congress. He says she personally signed the State Department cable authorizing security reductions. We have now seen this cable, and she did not sign it. Her name is printed at the bottom, just like tens of thousands of cables sent every year from the department. As I close, the Washington Post fact checker called this accusation a whopper, that's their word, and gave it 4 Pinocchios. Chairman Issa attacked Ambassador Susan Rice for statements she made on Sunday talk shows, claiming the administration, quote, deliberately misled the American people. The claim has been directly contradicted by our nation's top intelligence official, General James Clapper. He has already testified before the Senate that these attacks against Ms. Rice were, quote, unfair, end of quote, because, quote, she was going on what we had given her, and that was our collective best judgment at the time. There have also been allegations that the Accountability Review Board, led by Ambassador Thomas Pickering and Admiral Mike Mullen, failed to examine the role of Ambassador Patrick Kennedy. This accusation is, again, inaccurate according to the board. And so, Mr. Chairman, if this committee is going to suggest that General Dempsey, General Clapper, and all are all involved in a conspiracy of withholding military assets and then covering it up, and if this committee is going to accuse Ambassador Pickering and Admiral Mullen of failing to fully investigate these attacks, the least we can do is have them invited to this hearing today or in a future hearing. And according to our conversation yesterday with regard to Admiral Pickering and Mullen, you have said that you plan to bring them in the future, and I appreciate that. Last but not least, I want to make it very clear to our witnesses. I respect the witnesses who are here today to offer their testimony. As a lawyer and an officer of the court, I have tremendous respect for evidence. But today's hearing is not the full story. I hope we will eventually hear our military, our intelligence, and our diplomatic officials. Then I hope we can turn to the real work, as the chairman has said, of this committee, which is ensuring that the department implements the recommendations to improve the security of our diplomatic officials serving overseas, those who are so often unseen, unnoticed, unappreciated, and unapplauded. With that, I yield back.
I thank the gentleman.